So I know a number of you maybe are in professions or from places where you might have friends that post things that are kind of unique to your subset of folks, your demographic. As a pastor, I had a colleague post today. It said, "It doesn't feel like Thursday, it feels like Maundy," right? It's bad. It was actually noticeable because it was the first time I'd ever heard that one, actually, which just seems bizarre. But when we gather on Maundy Thursday, I always want to take some time to explain why we're here. So we have gathered on this Thursday before Easter for almost 2,000 years, and we tell the same story every time we gather on this Thursday. It is the story of the washing of the feet at the Last Supper. This isn't something that was invented in somebody's garage 3 weeks ago. We've been doing this a while. But we don't always remember the why or the how or the different places, and why is Monday spelled so strangely. So I'm going to go through that a little bit because it's good for us to take a moment every year and say, this is why we're here. So tonight we begin something that is not just this service right now, but rather is something that is ongoing. The liturgy begins this evening, and the liturgy concludes at about noon on Sunday. But during this liturgy, we'll take breaks for the necessities of this life, but then we will return and gather and worship tomorrow and on Saturday and on Sunday. These are called the Great 3 Days. In Latin, the word is Triduum, the 3 days. But when we talk about the 3 days, and you're thinking Thursday, Friday, Saturday, 3 days. So one of the things when we gather at this time, we remember that Passover is a part of this. We understand that Jesus is a rabbi, a teacher and Lord. And you call me that because that's what I am, right? We just read that from the text. And in the Jewish tradition, the day begins at sunset. So the evening of Maundy Thursday to the evening of Good Friday, the evening of Good Friday to the evening of Holy Saturday, the evening of Holy Saturday to the evening of Sunday, when we don't typically gather for worship, but we hear about the disciples who walked on the road to Emmaus thinking that Jesus had not risen. So those 3 days is what we talk about. Maundy, M-A-U-N-D-Y. You come across that word once a year, the Thursday before Easter. That's when we use it. As Elizabeth said in the children's sermon, it comes from the Latin word mandatum. In English, it's not hard to picture what that means, right? Mandate, command, that is what the word is. That we love one another. Maundy, mandatum, command, that we love one another. Now, I've always wrestled with some of these days because they don't follow quite the sequence that I would picture. And Tim and I have had a number of discussions about this over the years, that on Maundy Thursday, we think Last Supper, right? We gather and we remember often First Communion. We do things related to that. This idea that the Lord's Supper, the institution of Holy Communion, something that marks us as Christians because we gather and share this meal. And you'll notice it's not referenced at all in the text that we just read, right? It's all about feet. Feet. Now, some of you, perhaps, are accustomed to having other people handle your feet on a regular basis. That's not been my discipline as a general rule in this life. But nonetheless, that would have been a very common practice. If you can imagine walking around in your sandals in dusty places, going from here to there, your feet would get dirty, though not all of you, right, as the text says. So it would be a sign of hospitality to provide water and other resources that one might wash their own feet, or in a more affluent home, there might be a servant who would do that on behalf of the guests who come. But something happens that's different in this regard. Jesus, as we know, takes off his outer robe, ties a towel around his waist, and begins to wash the feet of his disciples. Now, let's make sure we're using the right words. So, they're not family. They're not related to one another. He is their rabbi. They are his disciples. He is their teacher. They are his students. So there's a differential there. And Jesus isn't saying, oh, hey, let me cut that for you. He is doing something that the lowest member of the household would do for someone else. He's doing something very personal, something that would have been seen perhaps by others as a bit demeaning for his station. This idea of service, not when it's handy or cool or builds up one's position, but rather in a way that might cause people to think less of you at times. Now, I want to talk about this over and against the context of our current world. There have always been times, particularly, I would argue, in the model of Jesus, where we have the image of a man with disciples. Throughout history, there have been many, many images of men. But I would say right now in our media, we are bombarded by images of men who are attempting to show their status by the amount of power and force that they have over others. And in fact, the ability to take the lives of others. This idea of strength as power over the life of another. This model of service that Jesus presents us is a challenge. It causes us to enter a role relative to others that maybe doesn't feel good. It might cause us to lose our status. It doesn't show strength. It doesn't show my position in this family, in this community, at work, wherever it might be, where I want to communicate strength and authority. That's not the image that Jesus has. Now, throughout the centuries, we've tried to make Jesus stronger. In fact, there are all kinds of voices in the wider Christian community that are trying to make Jesus into a tough guy. That is not the image of Christ that we have. That is not the image of Christ that we have tonight. It is not the image of Christ that we have as we move through these holy 3 days. One of self-sacrifice, one of giving for others and serving in ways that cause others to be uncomfortable. I think that's one of the things we need to remember is the shock that would have come over those who were having their feet washed by Jesus. This is not right. But think about it. They perhaps wouldn't have blinked if somebody else did it. But Jesus does it. Jesus is saying, I want you to think differently. I want you to act differently in this world. And in fact, I give you a new mandate, a new commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. So as we begin these holy 3 days, be mindful that we are beginning in service. We are beginning with a reminder that Jesus is upsetting the apple cart as to social order and hierarchies. We are beginning with a mandate to love. Amen.